Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is keeping well and safe. My name is Alia Zaraouni, and I'm the Executive Vice President of Operations at DIFC Authority. I would like to welcome you all to our first session on economic substance regulations. As you know, the UAE has enacted economic substance regulations back on April 30th, 2019. This came as a response to an assessment of the UAE's tax framework by the EU Code of Conduct Group on Business Taxation and to also ensure UAE's alignment with OECD requirements. The regulations require UAE onshore and also free zone companies that carry out any of the relevant activities to maintain an adequate business presence in the UAE relative to the activities they undertake. I'm sure by now you have all received a communication on the DIFC client portal asking you to submit an economic substance notification no later than 12th of June 2020. And I'm sure you all have a lot of questions about this submission. This session should help you and guide you on the submission and what is really required from your side. I'm very pleased today to present our speaker, my colleague Tanuja Paramasevan, Senior Vice President Legal, who is our in-house economic substance expert and has been driving the economic substance initiative from DIFC's side. Before we get started, hi Tanuja, I'll just go over through a few short reminders and few housekeeping rules before we get started. So as an attendee, you can only listen. Your mic must be muted at all times. Your camera must be turned off to ensure everyone can benefit from the session. If you have any questions during the session, please feel free to type the questions in the chat box that you see to the right side of the page. You can type in your questions anytime during the session. We will be collecting these and Tanuja will address them during the Q&A session. Thank you all for joining us today, and now I'll hand over to Tanuja.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for attending this session on the Economic Substance Notification. My name is Tanuja Paramasevan, and I'm a Senior Vice President in the Legal Department. Once again, we welcome you to this session. We hope that you find it very informative. As Alia mentioned, can you please keep your mic on mute? And if you have any questions during the session, we will address all Q&As at the end. Please include them in the chat box, and we will address all the questions at the end. And keep your mic on mute throughout the whole of the session. We will start with initially with a presentation on economic substance. Thank you very much, Alia, for the welcome and the introduction. Just by way of a very quick background, as Alia mentioned, the UAE passed the economic substance notifications, economic substance regulations on the 30th of April 2019. It applies across the whole of the UAE in every jurisdiction, including all free zones and financial free zones such as the DIFC. The economic substance regulations apply in all low tax and no tax jurisdictions like the UAE. They also apply in jurisdictions like Cayman, Jersey, and other international jurisdictions that are also low tax and no tax. As Alia mentioned, DIFC requires all entities to file an economic substance notification by the 12th of June 2020, regardless of whether they conduct a relevant activity or not, and also regardless of what type of entity it is. So all legal entities in the DIFC need to file, including branches, whether they're a financial services firm or not, or non-financial, everybody needs to file. Now, there is a lot of information about economic substance. In completing your notification in particular, you will find that the UAE Ministry of Finance has issued a relevant activities guide. This will be very helpful for you to address any queries you have in relation to the relevant activities. It also includes a number of useful examples to determine whether you conduct a relevant activity within the meaning of the economic substance regulations or not. In addition, more information can be found on the DIFC's website on economic substance as well, and we have a whole page dedicated to this. I will show you this a little bit later on when we get to our forms as well. Now, if you are required to file an economic substance return because you conduct a relevant activity and earn income from it during the reportable period. Then you need to file an economic substance return within 12 months of the end of your financial year. And you need to demonstrate your economic substance during that period. More information about economic substance returns will be issued in the second half of 2020, so keep watching this space. It will be issued by the UAE federal government, by the Ministry of Finance. Okay, so we've covered this already, but who's subject to the regulations? The regulations apply to all licensees that conduct a relevant activity. And they will apply if you earn income from that relevant activity, and it applies for all financial years commencing on or after 1 January 2019. This is very important. We've received a lot of questions about what the reportable period is and what is the period that you need to specify as your reportable period in your economic substance notifications. We will go through this in a little while, but just keep in mind that it's all financial years commencing on or after 1 January. So for example, one question we received was, we're an entity with a 30 June financial year end. Should our financial year be, for the purposes of the notification, 1 January 2019 to 30 June 2019? The answer to that question is, if you're an existing entity that was established before 2019 with a 30 June 2019 financial year end, then your first financial year that you will be subject to economic substance regulations will be from the 1 July 2019 period until 30 June 2020. So that will be a reportable period because it's your first financial year commencing on or after 1 January. As we've said, it applies to all DIFC licensees, regardless of what legal type they are, whether they're private companies or public companies, whether they're partnerships or foundations, non-profit organizations, or a branch. It applies equally to everybody. Now, the relevant activities are these 9 activities listed here. We have financial services type activities like banking business, insurance business, fund management, and finance or leasing business. We also have non-financial activities like headquarter business, shipping business, holding company business, intellectual property, and distribution and service center business. You will find out more information on that in the relevant activities guide. There's a link to it on our website and within the notification form as well. We do encourage everybody to go and review that because that will really help you in filing your economic substance notifications. In determining whether you conduct a relevant activity or not, you should use a substance over form approach and look at more than just what your license activities are in your commercial license. You'll really need to look at what type of activities you're actually doing as a business to determine whether you conduct a relevant activity or not. Okay, so as a DIFC entity, what do you need to do? As we've said, the first thing you need to do is complete your economic substance notification, and you need to do this by the 12th of June. Now, it is only those entities that undertake a relevant activity and earn income from that relevant activity during the financial year that are required to meet the economic substance requirements in the regulations and file an economic substance return on an annual basis. You need to file a return within 12 months of the end of your financial year or reportable period, which is one and the same thing. Now, does it apply to everyone? Yes, it applies to all DIFC entities, regardless of whether they conduct a relevant activity or not. Now, if you are part of a group, then each entity in the group must file a separate notification for that specific entity. Okay, so all entities within a group need to file their own notification. As you know, the deadline's the 12th of June. We keep repeating it because it's very important that you comply and file these notifications by the 12th of June. The only entities that do not need to file a notification are those that are dissolved, struck off, or liquidated prior to the deadline, so prior to 12 June. Even entities that are under dissolution or under liquidation will still need to complete an economic substance notification If an entity is under liquidation, then it will be the liquidator that will need to log on and complete the notification on behalf of the entity. Now, before I get to the reportable period, DIFC has taken a slightly different approach to other jurisdictions. You will note that in the DIFC, as we've said, all entities need to file an economic substance notification. And this is because we want to get a baseline across all our entities at this point in time as to who is conducting a relevant activity and who falls within the economic substance regulations. It is most important for those entities that have a financial year end in 2019 to submit these notifications, but we do require everyone so that we get a baseline reading of relevant activities and the applicability of economic substance regulations to all entities in the DIFC. And in addition, this exception for dissolved or struck off entities also applies in the whole of the UAE. This is a requirement by the regulations and by the Ministry of Finance itself, and it's consistent with the approach taken in other international jurisdictions as well. So the only entities that are exempt are those that are dissolved or struck off. All other entities that conduct a relevant activity are still subject to the legislation. Okay. Now, like I said, we've had a lot of questions about the reportable period. So for your reportable period, most entities in the DIFC, and we have done an analysis of this, about 60% of the entities in the DIFC have a 31 December financial year end. So if you're an existing entity that was established before 2019 and you have a 31 December financial year end, then your reportable period is from 1 January 2019 until 31 December 2019. It is during this period that you must demonstrate that you have had economic substance in the UAE, and it is during this period that the regulations apply to you. It does not apply to you in 2018 or previous years. It's from 2019 onwards that these regulations will apply to you. As you know, notifications are due on 12th of June, and if you have a 31 December 2019 financial year end, then your economic substance return is due on 31 December 2020. So you need to file it by this date. Now, another example is where an entity has a 31 March financial year end. Now, in this case, your reportable period starts on the 1st of April 2019 and ends on 31 March 2020. Okay, and you need to file your notification on the 12th of June, and you must demonstrate economic substance during that period. However, your return is not due until 31st of March 2021. Okay, because this is the date that your return is due, 12 months from the end of your financial year. You don't need to demonstrate economic substance in previous years. So in 2018 or before 1 April 2019, you don't need to demonstrate economic substance during that period, and the regulations don't apply to you during that period. Okay, now in terms of the consequence of non-compliance, this is set out in the economic substance regulations. These are the penalties for failure to comply. So if you fail to notify the registrar, then there's a penalty of between 10,000 dirhams and 50,000 dirhams. If you provide inaccurate or incomplete information, a similar fine is payable. And if you don't demonstrate sufficient economic substance and you're required to, then you have a fine for that. And your information will be exchanged in terms of your parent company, your ultimate parent company, and your ultimate beneficial owners. If you continue to not comply with the regulations, then your second and consecutive failures will attract a higher penalty under the regulations. In addition to this, it is a requirement by the Registrar of Companies that all entities file an economic substance notification, and the registrar can also issue fines under the operating law for non-compliance. Right, so now what we're going to do is go through the form. So I'm going to now take you through the economic substance notification form. which is on our portal. Now, this is a test account. I'll just wait a little while to make sure that it's already up on our website. So it is a test account that I'm going through. I have logged in as myself. If you enter our portal and look for our economic substance notification, you will come to this form. Okay. Now, in this form, we've mentioned what the notification is, what the deadline is. From here, you can also link to the relevant activities guide. So if you click on that, you will go to the relevant activities guide issued by the Ministry of Finance. We do encourage all our clients to read this guidance. It's extremely helpful to figure out whether you fall within one of the relevant activities. It lists examples. It provides a lot of information here. So we really do encourage entities to go and have a look at this. In addition to that, we also have a link to our economic substance page on our website. This also contains a lot of useful information about economic substance, what you need to do. It links to the relevant activities guide and also to the Ministry of Finance page where you will find all the legislation relating to economic substance. We do encourage all entities to go through this, to read the frequently asked questions. So there's a lot of information here about why this legislation was enacted, when did it come into force, who do the regulations apply to, what are the relevant activities, all sorts of information. What's the economic substance test? It also has information relating to the notification as well. Who's exempt? We've been through this. And about whether multiple filings can be made by one entity. So all this information is contained. It's very helpful. Please do read through this, as it will answer a lot of the questions that you may ask. Now, the first part of this form, I think I will just mute all participants just to make sure. All right. So the first part of this form is about a designated person. Now, there's help text throughout this form. It tells you what a designated person is. We suggest that you include high-level persons such as a CEO, a general manager, or a senior executive officer, a director or an authorized signatory, a compliance officer, or a member of your in-house legal team. So I have put in my details, and then you're ready to go. The first question that we ask about on the notification form is whether the share capital of the entity in the DIFC is majority owned directly or indirectly by a UAE federal government or another government of the emirate of the UAE. So if you answer no, you can go straight on to the next question. However, if you answer yes, then you will be required to provide information about that government entity. So I'm going to say that it's a DIFC authority, and you will also need to provide the law or decree stating under which that government entity was established under. So for example, we've had questions that maybe a member of the ruling family or someone high up in the government owns an entity in their personal capacity, and whether this would be considered a government entity. The answer to that is no, it would not. It needs to be an actual part of the government. There's help text here about what that means, and that entity needs to have been set up under a law or a decree. So we do require you to provide the name of the government entity and their full law or decree number. If these don't apply, then you cannot answer yes to this. You would need to answer no. Okay. Now, the entity that we have here is an entity, like most of our entities, that has a 31 December financial year end. And based on this reportable period, you can see help text here about what a financial year end is. And if you find that this information is not correct, maybe this entity's financial year end, although initially it was 31 December, it has been changed to 30th of June. If that is the case, then we encourage you, well, you will need, before you can complete this form, to file another filing through the client portal on update financial year-end service request, and then update that information. Once you change that to 30 June, then you will be able to complete this filing. Okay, because your reportable period for economic substance is tied to your financial year end. Now, there's help text about what a reportable period is. This is extremely important. And if you need more examples, we suggest that you look at question 11 on our website, which gives you examples of what a reportable period is and what would apply to you. So in this case, our entity has a financial year end of 31 December, and therefore on our portal, automatically, we have provided the dates of 1st January 2019 as the start of the relevant date, and the end of the relevant date is 31 December 2019 in accordance with this financial year. However, if this is not correct, you can contact us on the ROC help desk by using this number or this email address, and we can assist you with changing this, but this will also require you to change the entity's financial year end because these two things are tied. Now, for all entities that were established prior to 2019, these fields are fixed on the system based on your financial year end. If your entity is established from 2019 onwards, then we have nominated the relevant dates for you, and we encourage you to select those dates. It's only entities that do not have a financial year end that's at the end of a month that can select any dates, and it will go to the registry's team to validate the dates that are put in. And another check for you to know, it is only entities, new entities established after 1 January 2019 that are able to have an 18-month period for their first financial year. So that should also be kept in mind. If you're an existing entity established before 1 Jan 2019, your reportable period can only be 12 months. But if you're established after 1 January 2019, you can choose to have an 18-month reportable period as your first financial year. Okay, so please keep that in mind. The next and most important question is whether you conduct a relevant activity. Now, what DIFC has done to assist you with this is that we have done a very high level and conservative mapping of all our different licensing categories and activities against the relevant activities under the economic substance regulations. So, for example, if you're a financial services firm and you have the activity of accepting deposits, even if you've said no here, certain questions will be asked just so that we get the correct answer and assist our clients with completing this form in a proper way. Okay. Similarly, if you have the licensed activity of carrying out contracts of insurance, then we've already mapped this against the insurance business relevant activity, and you will be asked some questions. It doesn't mean that you definitely fall within that relevant activity. We will encourage you to read the relevant activities guide here. There's yet another link to it to determine whether you do fall within it. So for the non-financial services firms, for example, a holding company business, if you have an activity of holding company, intermediate holding company, single family office, or any of the proprietary investment activities, then we have pre-mapped you against this activity. You can, of course, say no, because it's only in very limited circumstances that this holding company definition under the economic substance regulations will apply to you. But out of an abundance of caution and with a very conservative mapping that we've done, we have just flagged the question for our entities to consider. Similarly, if you conduct an activity like a fintech, if you're a fintech entity and you have either a software house type license or technology and R&D license or any of these IT related licenses, we've already flagged intellectual property business for you. Okay. And the other activity that is extremely broad under these relevant activities is the distribution and service center business. It's a service center business that's extremely broad because that applies to any service type activity where you are involved in a multinational entity and provide services to another member of that group. So we have mapped all the service type businesses here. And again, to see whether this actually applies to you, then we require you to check the relevant activities guide. So now with this entity that is in this test account, they have activities like a holding company license, and they have maybe that software house activity, and they are a service type business. So even though they've said no here, these questions are being asked for them. Please confirm whether the entity conducted or plans to conduct the relevant activity of holding company business. If they answer no here, then they can move on to the next question. If, on the other hand, they said, actually, I do, and I forgot to tick it above, then what will happen is if they answer yes here, then that relevant activity comes up for them here. Okay. Now, if I go back to no and I've realized, you know what, I didn't complete this properly, let me go back and answer yes to these, then those activities come up there. Okay. So, and you can select yes. Okay. So if we select yes here and I say, yes, I have done holding company business, I will tick this box. The question is, was income earned from the relevant activity during the relevant period? The help text is there to explain to you what that means. If I said yes, then the next question is, was tax payable outside the UAE? Again, if I said yes, I will choose the relevant country. So maybe I say I paid tax in Canada. For this relevant activity, and I will choose Canada and I will select it, and it will come there as the country where tax is payable. Now, in terms of intellectual property, I've conducted that activity as well. I will say, was income earned? I will say yes. However, I didn't pay tax outside the UAE. There's help text for this as well, and there are examples. We do encourage you to read all the help text. And if I said, no, I only paid tax for this in the UAE, or I'm only subject to tax in the UAE for this, I say no, you cannot then choose any of these options for country. Okay. In relation to the distribution and service center business, it doesn't apply to me, so I say no.
Assistant sa DIFC ba niya?
Now,
Sige
because
na, siya ni kuan.
I'm sorry, can everyone just put their mic on mute?
It would have been better.
Thank you. Now, because I ticked the activity holding company business, I have got an extra question of, is your income derived solely from dividends and capital gains, and you did not perform any other commercial activity? If I answer yes here, then I will be subject to the holding company business relevant activity. If I said no, then I will not be subject to it. Okay. Now, because I answered yes to intellectual property business, I get asked a few extra questions here to determine whether I fall under high risk IP. And there's help text for this here. And if you answer yes to these questions, did the entity create the intellectual property? Yes. But if I said no, I will get asked additional questions based on my answer. Okay. Did you acquire it from a related person? So like I said, it is customized based on your responses. And in this scenario, if you are flagged as a high-risk IP entity, then you do need to provide details about your parent entity. You'll see the help text there. A parent entity is an entity that owns the majority of shares or voting rights in the entity. And we have gone to the extra step. If I said, yes, I do have a parent entity, then we have gone and looked at all your body corporate shareholders, and the relevant one will be there in a drop down, and you can select the relevant entity. Unfortunately, because this is a text account, you can't actually see all my drop downs, but you can see I've chosen XYZ there, investments, because that's my parent entity that has been registered on our public register. Then you get asked the question, do you have a ultimate parent company? There's help text for what an ultimate parent company is. If you answer no, you can move on. If you answer yes, you need to provide the details of that parent entity. So for example, I've got ABC Limited, and it is registered in Australia with that registration number. I can save that information. Okay, and I can move on to the next page of this form. Which then, because I've been flagged as high risk IP, I also need to include information about my ultimate beneficial owner. Now, in this, there is help text for ultimate beneficial owner. It's important to note that the UBO definition here is very different to the UBO definition that the DIFC uses. This is the one under the economic substance regulations. So this definition applies to all entities, and there are no exemptions. You need to list any individual that owns 25% or more, directly or indirectly, in that entity. So if I say I do have a UBO, I've put down my name, some dummy details here. These are the answers you need to provide in relation to your UBOs. If you want to add a UBO, you click on that. You can add more than one. And these are the information that you need to provide. Okay, so I'm going to cancel that. I only have one UBO. That information is already there. And then you just have two more questions. Please note again that these information about high risk IP, parent companies, ultimate parent companies, and UBOs will only be asked if you've answered yes to the high risk IP questions, and if you've said that you conduct the relevant activity of IP business. Okay, if you don't conduct this activity and if you didn't answer yes to those questions, then these questions will not be asked. You will move straight to section 6 on tax residency. So they're asking me the question, was I a tax resident? Was the entity a tax resident in a jurisdiction outside the UAE during the reportable period? If I answered yes, then I need to select the jurisdiction. Here I've selected Australia, and that's done there. And then the final question is, does the entity meet the following conditions? Is it wholly owned by one or more UAE residents? In this reference to UAE residents, it's to natural people, okay? It's to individuals like you or me. Confirming that it was not part of a multinational group and that it only carries out business in the UAE. If I say yes here, then that is another question that we're asking. And finally, you say yes to the declaration, noting that this information may be shared with the Dubai Financial Services Authority, DFSA, particularly if you're a financial services firm. It will also be shared with the National Assessing Authority and the Competent Authority, which is the Ministry of Finance, and it may also be shared with other relevant government or regulatory authorities, but only in relation to the economic substance regulations. Okay, and just reminding you again that it's an offence to provide inaccurate or false or misleading information, both under the economic substance regulations as well as under the operating law. And further, that the designated person that you have nominated on the form should be able to answer questions in relation to this notification and has been authorised by the entity to file this form. So that is basically the end of the form. You then fill your declaration that you normally do for any uploads on the portal, and you're done with that. Now I'm going to go back to our presentation and then we can take any questions. But before we do, I just want to show you a very little summary of basically this whole process. So we have mapped this out for you. I'll give it a few minutes for it to appear. I think it should appear there. So a very high level summary of this whole process flow for the notification is provided here. We will put this PDF on our website as well under that economic substance page. So if you look for it, definitely by next week, it will be there. So as a very high level summary, this is where, based on your responses, all entities need to file an economic substance notification by the 12th of June, right? And based on your responses here, it will give you an indication of whether you are subject to the economic substance regulations, whether you need to meet the economic substance requirements, and whether you need to file a return. Please don't forget that a return is due 12 months from the end of your reportable period, which for most entities that were in existence before 2019 is 31 December of this year. 31 December 2020 is when you need to file your economic substance return, and more information on this will be provided in the second half of the year by the Ministry of Finance. So now I will stop presenting and I will take some questions. Okay.
So maybe I can ask you some questions and we can take it from there?
Yes, please, Khushbu.
Okay, fine. So I've tried to categorize them into different categories so that we can answer as many questions as we can.
Right.
So the first one is, am I supposed to file? It states that if the company is incorporated in September 2019, or if they've recently incorporated, are they supposed to file?
Yes. We are requiring all entities to file an economic substance notification. You would have noticed that all the questions are framed in, have you or do you plan to conduct a relevant activity during the reportable period? So all entities are required to file an economic substance notification, even new entities, because we're trying to get a baseline assessment of all the entities that are subject to economic substance. So at this point in time, we require all entities to file unless you have already been struck off or dissolved.
If an entity has no revenue, are they supposed to file?
Yes. So all entities need to file. However, for that question about did you earn income during the reportable period, you would answer no. So you filed the notification, but you won't need to file a return.
Got many questions relating to representative offices. So are representatives offices supposed to file notification?
Yes. So all branches are also required to file a notification, just like a company incorporated here.
Okay. The next category of questions we got was relating to, am I conducting a relevant activity? Can we provide, for example, if I'm conducting an ISPV, I am a branch who's just marketing parent company products. So can we comment on such things, Tanuja? Can we confirm to them if they're conducting relevant activity?
So as the DIFC, we cannot confirm whether any entity conducts a relevant activity or not. We do ask all entities to review the relevant activities guide, because that will be your baseline to figure out whether you conduct a relevant activity. Like I've said, it provides a lot of useful examples and it will tell you whether you fall within the relevant activity or not. Please keep in mind that this is UAE legislation. It's not DIFC legislation. It is required to be implemented in all jurisdictions and in all free zones and financial free zones like the DIFC. So we can't tell you whether you conduct a relevant activity or not. That is for you to determine based on the information. Please review the relevant activities guide. Please review the Ministry of Finance website and review our website as well. And if you're still unsure, then please do get independent advice. But to finish that, but to assist our clients, like we've said, we have done a very, very conservative high level mapping against all our licensing categories here in the DIFC. And so where we think you may fall within a relevant activity, we have flagged that. It does not necessarily mean that you do that activity, so you still need to check whether it applies to you.
Okay. The next question mainly relates to, and just to cover on the previous point as well, that even if you're doing zero, even if you have zero revenue, you still have to file, right? Because we are getting repeated questions on those.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
It's
The next
notification, but not a return.
That's great. So the next set of questions are relating to reportable period. So the first question is, my company's financial year end is 30th June. So then does my company require to comply the reporting deadline as of 12th June 2020?
Yes, correct. Because this is a notification form. So it's just high level questions. As you can see, it's very easy to answer. And if you don't do an intellectual property business, then it's like super quick to complete. So all entities need to file a notification. But if you don't conduct a relevant activity, you will not need to file a return.
Okay. What about representative offices of international banks? Because we're getting this question repeatedly as well for notification and return.
Right. So for notifications, all entities, including branches and branches of banks at this stage, based on the regulations that have been issued back in 2019, all entities are considered licensees, even if they're branches, and they will need to file a notification. In relation to returns, we will get further information about that in the second half of the year. But for notifications at this stage, for the 12th of June deadline, all entities, including branches, and even if you're a financial services entity, you will still need to file a notification.
Okay. The next question is, I opened an entity in Feb 2020. What is my reportable period?
So if you incorporated in Feb 2020, then your reportable period, actually there's an example on our website as well. Your reportable period will start in Feb 2020, but depending on your financial year end, that will be the end of your reportable period. So I can't answer. If you've chosen 30 June as your financial year end, then most likely, because you can use an 18-month financial year end, you can say that your financial year end will be 30 June 2021. If, on the other hand, like most of our entities, you've chosen a December financial year end, then it will be 31 December 2020 will be your financial year end.
Okay. Now I'm just going to go to some of the general questions that we are being asked. Some of the specific questions, sorry. Will investment in bonds that are not traded on any stock exchange but traded on OTC markets be considered as lease finance business?
Unfortunately, we cannot provide any specific advice to an entity as to whether they are conducting a relevant activity or not. We do encourage you and highly recommend that you read the relevant activities guide, because that will answer most of your questions. So please read that thoroughly. And if you're still unsure, then we suggest that you get independent advice.
That's great. Does an NPIO registered in September 2019 also require to submit ESR notification, which I believe is yes, if their first financial year will end on December 2020 and they do not conduct any relevant or commercial activity? The response is yes, right?
Yes, the response is still yes. They've already mentioned their reportable period. So yes, it's December 2020 and the start date will be the September 2019 when they were incorporated. And they still need to file a notification. Most likely, if you're an NPIO, you will not need to file a return based on what you've said for your relevant activities. And one more point to note about NPIOs and foundations, that question about whether you are wholly owned by UAE residents, the help text is there already for you. But if you are a foundation or an NPIO, you cannot answer yes to that because there are no owners of a foundation or a non-profit incorporated organization.
Tanuja, can you please repeat on which entities are not supposed to file notification?
The only entities that don't file a notification are those that are already dissolved, struck off, or liquidated prior to 12 June 2020. All other entities, regardless of their type or whether they're a branch or whether they're financial or non-financial, will still need to file an economic substance notification by 12 June.
Okay. What is the difference between ESR and the country-by-country reporting?
Okay, they're two different schemes. So country-by-country reporting applies to large multinationals with a revenue of billions of dirhams or dollars, but it's a different scheme. You can find out more about country-by-country reporting on the Ministry of Finance website. They have a section dedicated just to that. Economic substance regulations apply in low tax or no tax jurisdictions. It's an OECD initiative, and it applies to all licensees in the UAE and is separate to country-by-country reporting.
Okay. Will DFSA be conducting any substance test as part of the return?
At this stage, it is the Registrar of Companies that is tasked with the economic substance regulations for financial services firms. We will be liaising with the DFSA as required. However, at this stage, and the indications we've got from the ministry, is that there will be a national assessing body that will assess economic substance for all entities in the UAE. So it will not be the Registrar of Companies or the DIFC that will be assessing whether you actually meet substance or not. It will be a national assessing authority that will do it across the board for all entities in the UAE. They will, of course, speak to each jurisdiction, like the DIFC, to verify the information submitted in notifications and in returns.
Okay. There are certain individuals who are asking that if they had any non-compliances in 2019 and specific to physical presence of board meetings, would there be any exemptions given on those breaches, if they've had any?
We can't really answer those questions because, like I said, it will be a national assessing body that will be applying the economic substance requirements consistently across the whole of the UAE and for all entities in the UAE. However, most likely, we think that they will be a little bit lenient for the 2019 period, given that a lot of the legislation and the protocols and procedures came into place quite late in 2019. So most likely they'll go a little bit more lenient, but because it became a very important topic towards the end of 2019, we'll be expecting all entities from 2020 onwards to fully comply with all requirements. But really, we can't speak on behalf of the National Assessing Authority, but this is what we think may happen.
Okay. If my subsidiary is registered in DMCC, shall we file notification in DMCC for the subsidiary or in DIFC?
So no, the only entities you file notifications for in the DIFC are DIFC entities. So you will need, the parent entity will file a notification in the DIFC for the parent entity, and the subsidiary will file a notification in DMCC for that subsidiary. But like I've said before, most other jurisdictions are not requiring all entities to file a notification. Most other jurisdictions are only requiring those entities that conduct a relevant activity to file a notification. In the DIFC, we're asking all entities to file it because, one, it helps and protects our DIFC entities because they won't be in breach of the economic substance regulations if, for example, they actually do conduct a relevant activity and didn't file a notification. And on top of that, it allows the DIFC to set a baseline for all entities in the DIFC as to whether they're conducting a relevant activity or not, and assists us with ensuring that we comply with the economic substance regulations and OECD's requirements.
Okay, thank you, Tanuja. Tanuja, there is one repeated question that we're getting, that if I am a Cat 4 license, I have a Cat 3 license, which relevant activity should I select? And should I file or not?
So all entities do have to file. And like we said, we have worked with the DFSA to map the financial services activities as well. So we have done a very high level mapping. We're not saying that our mapping is correct, and it's a conservative mapping as well. So we've already kind of flagged if we think it may apply to you. All entities do need to file a notification. All entities should look at the relevant activities guide to determine whether they fall within the definition of those relevant activities.
Okay. There are a few questions relating to service and distribution center where they're asking for more explanation on that.
Okay, so again, if you look at the relevant activities guide, that will give you a lot of information about what sorts of entities will fall within this. This potentially is one of the broadest relevant activities, particularly for the service center type activity, because a lot of our entities in the DIFC conduct services. So it can potentially apply to law firms, accounting firms, any entity that is part of a multinational group and provides services to another member of its group that's outside the UAE and charges for those services. Right. So if you're a big accounting firm or a big law firm and you work on a joint project with your UK office, and it's a contract that the UK office has obtained, and you are part of that, people within the DIFC entity are part of the project team that works on that project, and the UK entity is charging their client in the UK, and it includes fees that were incurred by the DIFC office. And as a result of that, once the matter is done, the UK entity will then provide some funds to the DIFC entity for that project where they collaborated. Then potentially you are caught under that service center type business, and you should look at the relevant activities guide. There is a specific example on that, and see whether you conduct the relevant activity of distribution and service center.
We're also
Sorry, just to complete that question. However, if you are a entity that is not part of a multinational group and you're a service type, you do service type activities, then you would not fall within that definition. It's only if you're part of a multinational group and you collaborate with other members of your group and they're billing for services outside the UAE and will be giving funds to the UAE entity.
Okay. We have a few questions relating to headquarter business as well, where they're asking for more explanation on that.
Sure. So with headquarter business, we have done a high-level mapping against certain of our licenses, like managing office. So with headquarter business, again, we suggest that you look at the relevant activities guide to see whether you fall within that specific definition of headquarter business. And if you do, then tick that as a relevant activity, and if you don't, you say no.
Okay. The next question is VAT paid in a foreign country considered as tax paid to a foreign country, or is foreign taxation question relevant on income tax?
It's more in relation to corporate type taxes than VAT. But yes, that's what we would say would be. But again, look at the relevant activities guide and the help text to help you determine that.
Okay. Next one is if IP services are provided to a country outside the UAE and WHT is deducted at source when fees is remitted to the UAE, is this WHT considered as tax paid for reporting purposes?
I really can't answer that question. I'm sorry, I'm not a tax specialist. I don't even know what WHT means. So again, look at the relevant activities guide, check the help text, and if you have additional queries even after that, then please do get independent advice.
Okay. What are the next steps after notification? Are they supposed to wait till the time they have to file a return?
Yes. So once your notification is done, if you conduct a relevant activity and if you've earned income from it, and if you don't fall under one of the exemptions, such as you're not 51% or more owned by a UAE government, or you didn't earn any income from that relevant activity, although you did it, or any of the exemptions, more guidance will be provided towards the second half of this year about who needs to file a return. You will only need to file a return if it's applicable to you. It's only notification that applies across the board to everyone. Returns are only to be filed by those that are subject to the economic substance regulations, and then in that return they will need to demonstrate that they met the substance requirements.
Thank you. What if we don't have a financial year end?
So all entities have to have a financial year end. So the most important thing is that you go in and nominate a financial year end, and you won't be able to complete your notification without first nominating a financial year end. Please keep in mind that if you are a new entity, meaning you've been established after 1 Jan 2019, you can have an 18-month financial year end for your first one.
Okay. The parent entity in case of an IP, should it be a UAE registered entity?
No, the parent entity can be registered anywhere. We do just ask for the jurisdiction though.
Okay. Where can we find the relevant activity guide?
So there are links to it on our website under the economic substance page. The relevant activities guide is actually on the Ministry of Finance website, and there's links to that relevant activities guide throughout the notification as well.
Okay. Is the definition of quorum for an annual general assembly meeting based on number of voting shares or number of directors?
More guidance will be issued on returns. This is in relation to actually figuring out whether you meet substance, but normally we would think that quorum will be as determined by the entity's articles of association.
Okay. We're getting a few questions that if you're not sure if you're conducting a relevant activity, which I believe you've already answered again, but I'll request you to repeat that. If you're not sure if you're conducting a relevant activity at this stage, should we wait for DIFC's feedback?
No. Please file a notification based on what you think it is. I can understand that for new entities, especially those that haven't completed their financial year end or their relevant reportable period, they may not yet know whether they're conducting a relevant activity or not. So based on your knowledge right now, fill out that notification. New entities will have another opportunity either as part of their confirmation statement later on or next year as part of notifications to clarify that.
Okay. I think the last question, because I can see a lot of similar questions. For tax residents outside UAE, will it be considering all the subsidiaries?
So no, when you're talking about tax residents outside the UAE, it is for that particular entity, not for the subsidiaries. We've received these questions as well. So they have a DIFC entity with subsidiaries in another jurisdiction where those subsidiaries are liable to tax in that other jurisdiction. However, the notification is for the DIFC entity, not for the subsidiaries. So you have to look at whether the DIFC entity itself is paying tax in another jurisdiction.
Okay. What if you decide you should report as one type of relevant activity and then the DIFC or the UAE government decides that you have not reported the accurate one or you should have reported something else as well? What will happen in such case?
So we can't, it will be the National Assessing Authority that will determine in the end after basically consulting with the relevant jurisdiction as well. So if you're a DIFC entity, they will consult with us as well, figure out what sort of licensing activities you do. We can't speak for that National Assessing Authority, but we anticipate that there will be some dialogue. And the reason we're asking you to file these notifications is so that you can better understand whether you conduct a relevant activity or not. To ensure that you do comply with the regulations and turn your mind to these questions now rather than waiting for the time of return and then trying to figure it out.
Okay. I can't find the question, but I remember it. It was around the line that if there's no physical presence in terms of the board meetings, can they consider conference calls? Can that be included if the conference calls is done from outside UAE?
Right. Again, there will be more guidance on the actual economic substance requirements. Some of that is already there in the legislation. From my memory of it, it was that a quorum needed to be present in the UAE, and that the directed and managed test is for within the UAE, and conference calls would not normally be included there. This may be different now in light of COVID, but we'll have to wait and see what the National Assessing Authority has to say about those matters. But please do look at the regulations. There are specific information in there in the regulations and the overall guidance on the regulations about how you meet your substance requirements and how you are directed and managed in the UAE.
Okay. Just I think one more. Okay, if there's a relevant activity being conducted as part of the first part of the year, and the second part of the year there was another relevant activity that was conducted, are they supposed to select both?
Yes, so it's all the relevant activities that were conducted during the reportable period. So it doesn't really matter whether it's the first half of the calendar year or the second half of the calendar year. It's more whether it was during that reportable period, whether you conducted a relevant activity. So it's any financial year commencing from 1 January 2019. If you conduct multiple relevant activities, you'll need to list those, all of them.
Okay. Is providing an audited financial statement a requirement? Not as of now, right?
As of now, no, we don't require any documentation to be filed as part of the notification. But at return time, we are not sure at this stage what will be required. This will be determined by the federal government.
Okay, so I think Nuja, we close all the questions because I think we've answered most of them. I think there's one common question coming across: where can I find this notification? You can find this on DIFC portal. As soon as you enter the DIFC portal, go to the services tab, select company services as the option, and put economic substance in the search button. As soon as you put that, you'll find a service request. Apply against the service request and you'll see the form that Tanuja had presented previously.
Exactly. So you do
Yeah,
have to go
and
onto your portal.
correct. What we'll even do as part of the email that will get released out post this session, we'll give you a detailed guidance on where exactly you can find this specific service request as well. Yeah. Thank you so much, Tanuja, for the training and for the guidance.
No problem. Thank you, Kushbu, for
Thank you,
asking all those
everyone.
questions. And thank you, Alia, for the introduction. And most of all, thank you all for waiting through this 1 hour long session. We hope that that this session was helpful and that you got something out of it. If you have any more general questions, please feel free to contact our contact center. Kushbu will give you details, or reach out to the ROC help desk. We're here to assist you where we can. Like we've said before, we can't answer any specific information about whether you conduct a relevant activity or not. That is for each entity to determine for themselves.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon. Bye.
Bye.